Sean from Better HR, and I'm joined with HR and employment law expert Weta. How are you, Weta?
Good, thank you, Sean. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Okay, so we're here to answer a few common HR questions that we're getting recently. So the pandemic has forced a lot of businesses to change how they operate. So if a business is looking at changing an employee's job duties, what sort of things do they need to be mindful of?
First of all, they need to be mindful that they need to be reasonable when changing an employee's role or duties.
Are there any other sort of factors they need to be conscious of when making these decisions?
Yes, they do need to be mindful that if they change an employee's job description or role significantly, it might lead to the employee thinking that you've made that position redundant and go for redundancy, or that you've altered their job so much so that you essentially force them to resign, which would lead to an unfair dismissal. And if there is a protected attribute applicable to them, they might go for a general protections, which essentially means that they were terminated because of a protected attribute.
So then if employees are in the general retail industry award, are there any specific things they should be aware of in regard to restructuring positions?
Yes, so the award specifically requires an employer to consult with an employee for any significant changes to their duties. So an employer firstly would need to identify what the position is and what changes they want to introduce into the position.
Mm-hmm.
Then consult with the employee about the changes that they're looking at implementing. That allows the employee to feel part of the process and give some valuable advice. Once that has been done, once the consultation has been conducted, they would need to essentially put that in writing, whether it would be an update to their job description or a change to their employment contract. Those changes would need to be reflected on paper.
Okay, and then what happens once they're reflected on paper? Would it be a regrading or a change? Or?
It depends on the type of changes they're trying to introduce. So if you're trying to take away some of an employee's duties, then and putting them into a lower classification, you would need to state that, and that there would be a change into their pay grade. Essentially, if an employee agrees to any terms, those terms need to be updated in their contract or the job description.
Okay, so what comes from the consultation as to whether the employee agrees or disagrees?
Correct.
So the employee can essentially go down the path of, I think my role has been changed significantly, so therefore I've been made redundant.
Correct.
Or I'm happy to accept those changes and I will continue under the new terms and conditions.
Correct. There is nothing that restricts employers from discussing any particular changes they want to implement with an employee and the consequences of such changes. It's then left up to the employee to decide whether or not they're willing to adapt to the changes.
Okay. So then if you have an employee, you go through this process, you try to consult, you try to reason with an employee as to why you need to make these changes and you do that fairly. And then the employee doesn't agree, doesn't want to accept that. What's the path for the employer?
It would be redundancy at the end of the day. So they would need to make that position redundant and essentially employ someone else in the role that they're looking at implementing.
Okay. Excellent. Well, that's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.